Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to create this Japanese inspired landscape watercolour painting. All you need for this painting are 2 jars of water to make cleaning your brushes easy, A4 paper, the reference photo, paintbrushes and of course watercolour paints. I'm going to jump straight into the video so you can paint along with me, and I really hope you enjoy this tutorial. To begin with, for this painting I really wanted to focus on the building, so I created a really nice dark brown mixing a warm brown with a little bit of blue that then cools this down and makes it extremely deep and dark. I also had a lemon yellow that I left as is, as I wanted a really bright vibrant colour, and I also mixed a little bit of lemon yellow with a tiny drop of that brown for the shadows on the yellow sections. I then began with the dark brown for the building, and I wanted to work section at a time with each individual colour to prevent bleeding, as you don't want all these colours merging together without that drying time, as buildings are very clean cut with the lines. Especially this building, you've got that distinction with the roof from the yellow section. On the right hand side of the roof, I believe that it was a little bit darker, so I lightened the left hand side of each section using a little bit of water and less of the paint, and then on the right hand side I used far more of the paint and less water. Once you've got all of the brown down in every single area where it is really dark, you then want to allow some drying time, and this is really important, as like I say, you don't want these colours bleeding together. If you're going to take anything away from this part of the painting, it would be to allow things to dry. You can move on to another section in the meantime, but you really don't want that yellow going into the brown. So I started out with the lemon yellow and began adding a couple of the really light sections. I also created a nice golden yellow with a drop of red just to brighten this up, as I think the vibrancy was definitely missing from this yellow section. And you don't want to be adding any detail yet, this is just to get the foundations down before going in later and adding more detail, more clean cut thin lines. I added a bit of light blue within the windows as well, just to take away that negative space from the white, and a little bit of just brown without the blue added to add a bit of warmth towards the bottom, so you've also got that colour variation. So now that we've got the basics for the building down, we can start creating the colours for the greenery that is surrounding it. I started out with a nice basic lemon yellow. I also created a lime green, so I mixed a bit of earth green with some yellow to create this colour, and it was a nice vibrant green. I then added just a little bit of earth green down on its own, and then I added some earth green with some brown to create a nice dark deep green. So there's quite a lot of colours to get down for this, but the main thing to remember is we're going from light to dark, and this becomes far less overwhelming when you are aware of this. Before I went in with these colours, I used that really dark brown that we used for the building just to add a few basic branches. And if you're wanting to know where to put these exactly, I have created an outline that you can access over on Patreon, so make sure to take a look at that down below, and it's ready for you to print out or trace straight onto for painting. I then went in with the lightest colour, in this case the yellow, and using a flat brush I added a bit of the colour to there, scraped off all the excess, and then actually dotted it onto my palette head on to create more of a bristly effect. Once I was happy with how this looked on the palette, I actually went in onto the paper. You can use a scrap piece of paper if you're not 100% sure, and you're wanting that bristly dotted effect, painting with the brush head on and adding as much of this paint down as possible. After I was happy with where all the yellow was, I went in with the lime green and did the exact same thing, so I scraped off the excess, dotted a little bit of it off head on, and then went in, dotting head on again and adding the lime green mainly under a lot of that yellow. Then of course I used the earth green, just the green on its own, did the exact same thing, dotted it onto the page, slightly under the lime green, going into it slightly, and because the paper's not wet, they should bleed together really nicely. And then to finish, I went in with the dark green and did the exact same thing. And if you're not happy with how dark this is, you can actually use a little bit of the dark brown that we mixed for the building. Again, you only want a little bit on the brush and dotting off that excess, painting with the brush head on, and a flat brush is perfect to create that bristly effect that we're after. And you should notice that all the colours merge really nicely. That's definitely the aim for painting these trees, while still having the texture of trees. Once I was happy with all of this detail, I then went in with that warmer yellow to add some more detail to all of the yellow sections of the building. And this included a lot of little lines going horizontally and vertically, so it's really simple to actually get the detail in there. As well as this, I went in to add the railings, still using the same technique though with these lines, and as long as they're clean cut, you can't really go wrong. I then allowed for some drying time before continuing the rest of the painting, as we don't want everything bleeding together as I've mentioned before, and I think the trees are in a really good place to now leave them and then come back to them later on. So I created a nice light grey to add in a few rocks, and I made sure that none of them were touching at this stage so that I could go back in later to fill in these gaps. Otherwise, again, they'll all merge together and will not look like rocks, it will just look like a little bit of a mess really. So keeping them separate and leaving that gap for now is going to come in handy later on. Behind the trees that we've already got mapped in, there's definitely some more that are further in the distance, so I wanted to get these mapped in separately so that you can see they aren't together and they are that little bit further away. So I used some dark brown to add a few little lines going vertically up the page following the reference photo, and then added some dots gradually getting wider as they go behind the trees that are already mapped in to create the pine tree look. And it's a really simple way to make sure you've got the rest of them trees in the background added in. I then used a light blue to get the sky mapped in, and I shaped around to the clouds that I wanted to include, cleaned my brush and then used a little bit of excess water to create more of a natural blend into where the clouds actually form. I also added a little bit of that grey that I used for the rocks within the clouds just to give them a little bit more depth, as clouds are never completely white. You've always got the greys and undertones of blue creeping through somewhere. I then added some branches towards the bottom of the page, and then went in using the flat brush again and the same technique going from light to dark to add in the foliage that you can see towards the bottom, and then also filling in the negative space where the trees are, just with a few little dots of the different coloured paints that we've been using throughout this section, as you don't want that negative space creeping through. It's going to make everything look really strange if you do, so covering all the white with this at this stage, it's kind of getting that area out of the way so we can focus on the water section. So I added a little bit of a hill towards the left hand side of the trees with some light brown, also filled in the rest of them rocks with that light grey. And there's just lots of little sections that you can add in following the reference for going in to map the water. And it's really easy to assume with water that you'd go straight in with blue, but I'm actually not going to do this as there's a lot of symmetry going on. So if you look at the reference photo and also the trees above the water, this is going to be a really good frame of reference to add in the rest of this section. For example, straight under the trees and the building going into the water, you've got a lot of symmetry going on. So I'm going to go in with the exact same colours that I did for the trees and just flip it upside down basically, but a far less detailed version, as water, even though yes there's symmetry, it's not going to be completely accurate. It's not a mirror, it is still water. So I'm going in with the same colours and using the flat brush to create that same kind of texture, but this time I'm less worried about the amount of detail and taking my time getting the dots as small as possible. You can make them slightly bigger and fill that space a lot faster than before when we were painting everything back to front. And I'm just following the way the water moves and coincides with what's going on above it. So for example, below all the trees that I've then added in to the water, you've then got that blue section creeping through because it's symmetry of the sky that's above this in the reference photo. You can also do the same with the building. So underneath the building we've painted in, I'm going in with some grey and brown as that's what's on the bottom of the building, and then some yellows we come further down the page, really following the symmetry of colour as it flows throughout the building above. And this then creates that beautiful symmetrical painting and brings everything to life, and I love the effect of this. that symmetry can be really hard to achieve, but once you've got it down, it does tie everything together and you can really tell that it's water that you've painted. So instead of assuming that you're going with blue, you've really got to trust the process and that symmetry will eventually come to life. Then once you're happy with all of the detail that you've added to the piece, you can go in and add the dots on the edges. So to do this, I added a layer of water, section at a time, and then went in with every single colour that I've used, adding some dots, some small, some big, and lining the paper to create that beautiful dotted edge. And there we have it. Thank you so much for watching this YouTube video, and I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know how you found it down below in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more nature art content. See you next time for some more watercolour Japanese inspired landscapes. Bye guys!